I'm Bill Auten of Auten Claims Management.
I'm Chantal Roberts of CMR Consulting, and welcome to the Art of Adjusting podcast.
Today, we're going to talk about life as an insurance adjuster from the perspective of property, auto, liability, or workers' compensation adjusters. Our goal is to bring interesting topics in the world of claims adjusting to people who are working as an adjuster now and to people who are considering a career as a claims adjuster. Hey, Chantal, how you doing today?
Doing well. How are you?
Pretty good. I heard you were on a little bit of a trip. Welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you. Feeling better. Thanks.
All right.
All
Well,
relaxed.
so we're going to talk today about how to determine damages.
Yeah,
And
it kind of bleeds over from our last one.
yeah.
Yeah.
When we have a liability claim, we're looking at negligence first and whose fault it was. If it's a first party claim, we're looking at coverage and whether or not there's, liability under the policy.
Mhm.
But now we need to figure out what the damages are. And now we can talk a little bit about first party and then a little bit about third party, I guess.
Yeah.
So let's talk about first party claims.
Okay.
The property adjuster goes out and has to what we call scope the damage. And that's just recording notes and photographs, sometimes video of all of the damages so that they can write as comprehensive an estimate as possible so that they are sure that they're accounting for all of the damages that exist there.
Mhm.
I have an example of this. My son, two of them, both had apartment fires
Oh.
when they were away at college. Ben
Uh-oh.
happened a few years ago. Nick's happened Monday.
He's
So
okay.
he's okay. Yeah, it
Okay,
was a
good.
minor smoke damage kind of thing, but he's making his claim
Mm.
with his insurance carrier. And I said, you better let me take a look at that. So he made a list of about 5 items. I said, Nick, there's more. You missed some.
Yeah.
Believe me, you've missed some. It's the adjuster's job to go through and be as thorough as possible so that you're not missing those items. And a policyholder is not professional at this, so you can't just hand them a worksheet and say, "Go, you put all your stuff on here and hope for the best," and think that that's a fair way to handle it.
Right.
You
I'm
don't
I'm
want
gonna
the go ahead.
no go finish your thought and then I'm gonna interrupt you.
Yeah, you
Finish your
don't.
thought.
Right on. Um, I forgot my thought now.
You were saying you can't just
You
hand them a piece of paper, and a sheet and say, "Hey, fill this out," and,
yeah.
expect the
Policyholders don't
insured.
know, the first thing about making a claim in most cases. I mean, you have some experts out there that make claims, but you should be aware of them. But the other ones, for the most part, people don't know what to do and what to put in their list, and they certainly don't know how to write a building damage estimate unless they're a contractor. They can't write an estimate for their car unless they're a collision guy or woman, and so it's our job to assess that damage fairly. And we don't want to overpay the claim, but we don't want to underpay the claim either. That's not fair either.
No.
So that's the first party adjuster's job, is to actually account for all of those damages as thoroughly as possible.
Yeah, and what I was gonna, throw out is, there is a theory, and you and I have talked about it before, and Barry Zalma is the one who points it out, and of course, Barry Zalma is a huge, big thought leader in the insurance space, is that, originally, um, there were no claims adjusters, and the policy doesn't even speak to a claims adjuster. In fact, the policy speaks to the fact that the insured is supposed to present their own claim. But the problem is, just like you said, that insureds usually don't know how to do that. And so the job of the claims adjuster was invented by the carriers to help the insureds settle their claim. And we can even say the third party claimant to settle their claim, because our job as adjusters is to protect our insureds, and we can't do that if we just send a sheet of paper over to the claimant and say, yeah, you need to gather up all your medical bills or whatever and get back to me on that. So there is a little hand holding that needs to be done, even though it is the insured's duty, according to the policy, to submit all that information and to gather all that information themselves.
And I would say that that burden or the duty shifts quite a bit actually when it goes from a first party to a third party claim, because in those cases, um, so think of it this way: there's some old style releases out there floating around in the internet, and they used to be used a lot when I was younger, and today they still pop up from time to time. They'll have phrases in there that state that this claim is a doubtful and disputed claim. Have you ever seen that language in
Yeah,
a release?
yeah, yeah.
So that suggests that the premise of the third party liability claim is that there's a claim being asserted, and there's some doubt about its legitimacy and its value,
Mhm.
and it's the claimant's responsibility to make their case for whatever the damages are. So the adjuster, um, on the third party side, they're more of kind of a goalie between the claimant and the checkbook at the insurance company, to make sure that that claim that's being asserted is fair and in line. I don't feel like the third party adjuster is, um, you know, showing a case of money and saying you get this much.
Yeah,
As much as it is the claimant saying, I've been hurt in this amount of injury or this amount of damage, and I want compensation for it. And the adjuster's job then is to look at that and say, well, is that fair? And if not, we're going to make an adjustment. That's where the phrase comes from, I think. But
I would agree yet argue, as
okay,
as I am wont to do with you all the time,
we
which I
do
think
that a
is
lot.
is why, yeah, but I think that's why we work out well together.
Yeah,
Um, because I have also said to my adjusters when I was a claims manager that, if we come up with an estimate of damage amount, a scope of damages or whatever, and we say that the loss is $1,000, let's say, and the insured comes up and they say, no, no, it's $5,000. And the insured can present some of this documentation to help us reach maybe a middle ground, maybe $2,000 instead of 1,000. Well, then you make that adjustment. That's the reason, again, why the name is adjuster. You make adjustments. You don't just dig into the ground. And I think, and this is one of the reasons why I wanted to write the book, The Art of Adjusting, why I want to have these podcasts and everything, is I think that adjusters and companies forget that uh, our job, their job, the insurance company's job is to pay covered claims. And
yeah,
of course, not everything is covered. Of course, not everything is covered, but sometimes there is an art to doing that adjustment. Now, a room is going to be the same measurement no matter how many ways you measure it, but do you need two coats of paint? Do you need three coats of paint? I don't, that kind of stuff. That's a little bit of an art. That way you can adjust the claim. Uh, um, so
yeah. And there's when it comes to property damage, assessing it, um, you can get into the weeds on disagreeing over what is actually owed. And here's an example. Let's say you have a room that has a layer of lath and plaster
mhm,
on the walls, and then over that is a layer of paneling, and then over the paneling is a layer of drywall, and you have a fire in there. So do you owe to put the lath and plaster back, the paneling that was buried underneath the drywall, and new drywall? Some will say yes, some will say no. From a practical standpoint, the insured just wants finished drywall back there,
right.
you know. So, and there was no real integrity. lost if you eliminate, you know, I'm assuming that there would be no structural integrity lost if you did not put back lath and plaster and did not put back paneling below that drywall.
Yeah.
So disputes can arise as to whether or not you've got to replace all those things or just put some new drywall there, and the room will wind up, a half inch bigger on either side because of that. So those oftentimes are the nature of disagreements between, and actually that scenario right there could account for the difference between a $1,000 estimate and a $5,000 estimate in that room, by the way.
Yes.
So reasonable minds can agree to disagree. And at the end of the day, you have to have a way to extinguish the claim and get
Yes.
everybody paid and close the file.
And so
That
how would
doesn't
you,
mean, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I keep interrupting you. I was going to say, and how would you do that, Bill? How would you, what is a way to have a meeting of the minds?
Well, I think in that scenario, I would ask what is the actual necessity of having those items behind finished drywall, and uh, if push came to shove, let's say there was a let's say the whole matter went to appraisal, and or that there was a legal it was litigated or something like that, and let's say that a court decided that the lath and plaster and the paneling is owed because that's what they had. All right, fine. You can depreciate it. You depreciate it. You're not going to pay for replacement costs for that stuff unless they actually replace it.
Mm.
And then we'll see if they actually did put lath and plaster back with paneling and then drywalled over it to make the repair.
Mhm.
Um, that's one way to handle it. I would say that you're you do eventually have to have an agreement, and if the insured is being stalwart on that particular type of issue and you lose that battle, you take your licks and you pay the claim, and you exercise the hold back depreciation within reason and being fair about it, and call it a day, move on to the next one.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head that I was going for, is that the policy does have uh, ideas on how to handle these sorts of things if there is a problem, and that is the appraisal process.
Mhm.
You go through the appraisal process, which is, of course, not the appraisal where you send an independent person out there to write an estimate of damages. That, of course, is where the insurance company gets a person, an appraiser, who would go out and talk to the insured's appraiser, and they would pick an umpire, if and they do this before they even start, talking about damages or whatever. Then those two appraisers start talking and try to come up with a agreed estimate. If they can't, that's when the umpire gets involved, and that umpire comes up with the agreed amount. And there's a couple of things that I do want to point out about these appraisal processes, is that because the appraisal process is supposed to be unbiased and fair and everything, you as the insurance company and the insured, and this is especially important when the insured has like a public adjuster, cannot use the same uh, estimator, I suppose would be a better word so that we can distinguish between the two, cannot use the same estimator that they used who wrote the initial estimate, because that person has an invested interest. They don't want their estimate to be overturned, right? So since we're trying to come to a meeting of the minds, that means we got to have a second estimator going
A
out.
third party that
Oh,
has
exactly.
no prior awareness of the claim.
Right. And that means that when the insured hires another appraiser, and let's say that the public adjuster had been out there and the public adjuster had written the or the estimate, that he or she submitted to the carrier. The public adjuster cannot be the insured's appraiser. They got to go get
Right.
someone else. And I have seen court rulings come down where it says, yeah, if it is public adjusters are us, and you have Mr. Public Adjuster, Ms. Public Adjuster of the same company, they're not unbiased. They are also biased because it's the same company. I mean, like, you
Right.
literally need to get an independent. And this is something I don't think insureds understand a lot, because it means that they do have to pay some money out of pocket. And yeah, that is what this means. You got to have a little skin in the game. But I also want to bring it up to the carriers and to our adjusters on the carrier side, that yeah, you need to have an independent, so you got to have someone else do this. You've got
Yeah.
to have
And well, there's two things I'd like to mention about the appraisal process. The first is that, this is not something that was invented by adjusters or attorneys or public adjusters. It is part of the policy. It's
Mhm,
actually, if you look through your homeowner's policy or your commercial business policy, there is a section about the appraisal process, and it describes the whole process. And so that's the first thing. And it's designed for when there's a disagreement about the value of the settlement on a first party claim. The second thing I want to mention is that in this business, depending on where you live and the size of the city that you might be in, the resources for appraisers and umpires is small. So you wind up with folks having their favorites.
mhm, mhm,
And and to me, that kind of poisons the process a little. But just like when you have any subject matter expert,
mhm.
if they're um, always working on one side of the issue, of like plaintiff side versus
Yeah,
defendant side, and
yeah.
they're always taking one position, that creates some bias that's tough to get away from.
Ab-
And go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, myself as an expert witness, I take both plaintiff and defense side. So I take both the policyholder and the carrier side, because I don't want to be, marked as, plaintiff favorite or defense favorite or something like that. And to even be more fair, I will tell my retaining counsel, look, yes, they did something wrong, or no, they didn't do anything wrong, or whatever. But um, in my report, I'm going to point out, you could have improved XYZ, because I am going to be fair and impartial. That's part of my job as an expert witness. But one thing I did forget to mention, and I bet you're getting ready to mention it too, is this issue with appraisal processes are now going into coverage opinions, and they are
Mm,
not supposed to do that.
no.
Yeah, for our newer adjusters who are unfamiliar with the appraisal process, the appraisal process is solely for damages. If there is a
Yes.
contested part of the policy, let's say, for example, mold isn't covered or whatever, and the insured and their representative keeps wanting to put mold in there, and they say, well, this is the reason why we can't settle the claim, yada yada yada, blah blah blah. That would be a coverage opinion, and you cannot put that part into arbitration. And if the
Appraisal.
umpire, or appraisal, excuse me, yes, appraisal, thank you. And if the umpire starts talking about that, that is a problem. I don't
Yeah.
necessarily, I think that's when you need to get your defense counsel involved, or maybe coverage counsel, I don't know. But that is going to be an issue. That is going to be an issue.
Recognizing the differences between coverage and damage assessment is important on the first party side, and it's important on the liability side. And you've got a third element there of liability on the third party side. But yes, the lines get blurred
Mm.
when you are talking about the value of a repair and an issue like mold. Um, uh, in most times, if there's a water loss and the mold forms after the water loss happens due to the passage of time and to get contractors, that's going to be covered. But if the claim, the source of the claim is just mold, that's not covered.
Mhm.
So if you got a claim where there's some damage on one end of the building caused by a leaking, or a covered cause of loss,
Mhm.
mold results from that, that'll be covered. But if there's mold on the other side of the building that started 5 years ago because of dampness and things like that, that wouldn't be covered.
Right.
So if the insured is trying to bundle all that together, then that becomes a coverage issue. You are correct, and that is not subject to appraisal. And they need to get that sorted out before it goes to appraisal.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. That's part of the jobs that your two appraisers are going to be doing.
Yeah,
Yeah. So absolutely. Um, moving on to our, I guess, bodily injury kind of settlement,
yeah,
or do you feel like we've talked about property damage enough? I mean, we have had conversations previously about Exactimate, like what it takes. We haven't really talked much about auto, but a lot of times your auto have the same kind of deal of some kind of Mitchell, for example, is something
right.
that they use as an estimating program for car damages. Mitchell, so they use that to determine, or a lot of insurers are now using, preferred vendors. Um,
Mhm.
I've got my own problems, got my own issues with that, but there you go. So did
Well,
have we?
our friend, so for anybody listening who is in need of an auto appraiser, our friend Brandon Cabrera
Yeah,
is now appraising vehicles too. So
yay,
he is openly accepting assignments there, I believe. So
good job,
um,
way to go, yay, Brandon.
yeah, but so whether it's property or auto, there are estimating systems in place for those. On the property side, Exactimate is probably
Yeah,
one of the most common. SimSol's out there, and there's several others,
mm,
but on the auto side, Mitchell is the only one I can
think of right off the top of my head.
yeah, off the top of my head. Not being in that realm, I'm not really familiar with them, but um, I know with the collision estimates, the system that is used by collision shops is most often identical or the same system that appraisers use.
Yeah,
And the big disputes don't come in the pricing of the system as much as it is the amount of labor that's required. There's often a dispute over OEM parts versus, um, um,
LKQ.
yeah, yeah,
Okay, so just FYI, OEM is original equipment manufacturer. Like, so that's the original part from the manufacturer. LKQ is like kind quality.
right.
So that is like your generic, uh,
Off brand,
off-brand one, I guess.
right,
And
right.
by the way, Once Upon a Claim, Fairy Tales to Protect Your Assets does talk about all of that.
And that's out, isn't it?
Yeah, let me see. No, 2 more days actually.
Oh,
May 11th will be it.
all right.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. So, but you can, just 2 days. You can still pre-order,
I
but
pre-ordered mine. I can't wait.
yay. Yeah, but yeah, we've got and the fun thing about this is that I do, as I do this right near the microphone, um it is brought up into sections, and I have in the uh area here, um you have aftermarket parts too. That's the other part that I was trying. That's why I was looking this up, because I was like, there's a third one that I can never remember what it is. Aftermarket, if I recall correctly, that is the one that is taken off of old cars. So like if you have a 2019 Mini Cooper, and they
Junkyard parts.
yeah, they go out and find another 2019 Mini Cooper and pull that, from another thing.
Yeah,
So, yeah. But anyway, we have glossaries here so that you can like find what topic and all that kind of stuff.
almost like a real book.
It's almost like a real book that you accidentally learn something from
I'm sorry.
while
That
you
was
are
a that
being
was a kind of a shot. I didn't mean for that to come out that way, but it's the way my
no,
brain
no, no,
works.
no, yeah, you accidentally learned something. Okay, anyway, yeah, so there are a couple of differences with your auto things, and you're right, that is going to be it because a lot of times with your auto policies, it's always going to be ACV. But instead of with your property damage, your homes, which are usually going to be RCV replacement costs. So the insured, there's a very big bias over, do I get quote unquote generic parts, or do I get aftermarket parts, or do I get the part that's originally from the manufacturer? Now, because it's actual cash value on your policy or the insurance policy, then the carrier is probably going to be paying for like kind quality or
Right.
aftermarket or whatever, while the insured wants original because they had original. Why aren't they getting original? But original would be an upgrade or
Betterment.
quote, quote unquote a profit. And of course, you
Yeah.
can't profit from insurance. They don't allow that
Well,
except
it violates the principle of indemnity. That's
yes,
that's that's the idea.
yes, except that you really can, and that's what replacement cost is.
It does
However,
violate the yeah, replacement
however,
cost coverage does
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. But let's talk. I mean, that is called betterment.
Yeah, and it's a benefit that you pay for in the
E-
policy. That's why
Exactly.
your policy costs more is but if you have replacement
Yeah,
costs.
you actually
So
pay for that. So anywho, when the insured is arguing that they want OEM on their car adjusters, you can tell them absolutely, you can have that, but I can only pay you LKQ or aftermarket or whatever. You would have to pay the difference. So I guess what I'm saying, adjusters, is don't dig in. Tell empower the insured that they can do this. Absolutely, no problem. You're going to have to pay the difference.
right. Another thing that comes up with automobiles is
Value, diminished value. Yeah.
diminished value. Yes.
We also talk about that too. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that is the
I
concept
have
there is
issues.
that if you have a new car that's gotten into an accident and gets fully repaired, its value has then dropped because there's a history of a collision and repair on that vehicle, and that the policyholder is entitled to that difference in value as part of their collision claim.
Yeah. Now, this is something that's very important. A lot of states have been beginning to like mandate, like if diminished value, you have to pay for it or not. I think it might be on my webpage. I'm not exactly sure. You can look it up. Theartofadjusting.com, go to auto. Uh, because I do have issues, but I also use it. The theory is, again, like you said, that if there has been an accident, the value of the car is not as much, or the perceived value is not as much because there's something quote unquote wrong with the car. My argument is, well, if there's something wrong with the car, then repairs weren't done correctly. You need to take it back to the shop. You know, um, so is there such a thing as diminished value? Some states said, I don't care. You're going to take diminished value. Do you know how to figure out diminished value, Bill?
I've never done a deep dive into it. Like if I was asked to do that today
Mm,
without having a background, I
yeah.
would say I would have to use some, like Kelly Blue Book or something like that. And, they've got those boxes where you check condition.
Hmm.
And I think the difference would be something like brand new condition versus, fair or good.
Yeah,
And whatever, I don't know how they calculate those numbers when you check those boxes, but it would be something along those lines, I think.
that is pretty true. You also can call some dealerships and say, hey, I've got this 2019 Mini Cooper. It's been in a front end accident, rear end accident, side T-bone accident. I mean, where the accident happens also impacts the diminished value. Because, of course, if it has front end damage, a lot of people are concerned about hidden engine damage. If it's a side hit like a T-bone, a lot of people are concerned about frame damage, hidden frame damage.
Yeah.
And that sort of thing can impact your value on it. And so I mean, so what I'm saying basically is it's not just a flat 10% or that sort of thing. You do have to make some calls or do a little research, do a little digging.
Yeah, I feel like we're kind of hitting the high spots on all of the
Absolutely.
first party damage issues that you might encounter as a claims adjuster today.
Yes.
Um, and bear in mind that there are no catalogs where you can look up these values. You can use Kelly Blue Book for a car. You can use Exactimate to find out how much a 2x4 costs. Um, you can also go to your local building supply and see what materials cost there, and then just calculate your own estimate based on the amount of materials you're going to need.
Mm-hmm.
There's multiple ways to skin a cat. If
Aw.
you've ever gotten 5 contractors to look at the same repair, you're going to get 5 vastly different estimates. Does that mean that the high guy is trying to screw somebody and that the low guy is the best deal? No, that's not what that means. It might mean they missed something. It might mean they're incompetent. It might mean that they're a shyster and they're
Yeah.
trying to, get, more money than is actually fair.
Mm.
Um, so as adjusters, we have to navigate through all that
Yes.
and find the golden path to success where we can close the file. And that's where you hope you have reasonable people that you're working with. Because in my earlier example with the drywall over the paneling over the plaster, if you were to go to a reasonable person and say, hey, are you planning on replacing all of that stuff? And a reasonable insured would say, no, that would be dumb. Why
Hmm.
would I put lath and plaster and paneling and then put drywall? That's stupid. No, it's going to cost more for me to pull that stuff away and demolish it. So I want to be paid for that. But we're just going to put drywall over the studs and paint it. So um, that's kind of a reasonable approach, you would think.
So you um, just hit on something, and I was going like, I need to, because it was a perfect segue. And of course I've forgotten it because I'm like, yes, you're absolutely right. You're going, da 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 da. I think what you were talking about is how uh things, you could take 5 different people. That's what it was. You could take 5 different people to look at something and they
The
would come up.
same repair.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and they would come up with 5 different invoices or estimates or whatever. And I actually used this example in my book because a lot of people, attorneys, insureds, claimants, whatever, will accuse the insurance company and the adjusters of quote unquote lowballing because and the attorneys will point to the fact that you settled this claim for, let's say, $55,000, but your opening bid was $45,000. If you valued this claim at 55, that's what you should have originally offered us, is 55. And of course, we pretty much all know that if we started at our top quote unquote bid or our top authority level, we would have no place to go. I mean, like the attorney would still want more money. That being said, what I had said in the book is it's like a speed limit. And it, a lot of people are not aware, and I don't think it's printed anymore, that there is actually a minimum speed limit. It's like a speed zone. There's a speed limit zone, like a school
Right.
zone. Um, we actually have minimum speed limits. On your normal road, like your normal road is 35 miles per hour. Well, your minimum speed limit may be 25. Does that mean, if you're going 25 miles an hour, you're breaking the law? No. If you're going 40, yes, sure. But does that mean if you're going 27 or 30, it's wrong because the posted speed limit is 35? No. Does it mean that you're lowballing if you go 30 miles an hour instead of 35? No, because that whole range, and we've moved on, by the way, to third party damages, that whole range is appropriate. So just because we have offered 25 and that was accepted doesn't mean, as the insurance company, we have, quote, lowballed, end quote, the insured, or excuse me, the claimant, the third party claimant.
Yes. So when it comes to third party claims, and let's just focus on injury claims here, because
Sure.
if we talk about property claims, it's much the same as the property side of things, the first
Absolutely.
party claims, except the depreciation is more of an issue, and we can do tons of podcasts about
Yes.
depreciation, can't we?
Yeah, oh yes.
So let's talk about injuries here. And when we evaluate those, we're looking at two kinds of damages: it's special damages and general damages. And the special damages are the things that you can add up with a calculator: medical bills, lost wages, extra expenses, durable medical devices, all of those things. You tabulate those and you come up with a number. And I think in a past podcast conversation, you had mentioned that the old school way was to triple the meds, triple the
I think
value of
that's
that, and
the,
that's the amount of your claim, and that's a magic
yeah,
formula that never really.
it's kind of like this myth that never dies. And
Mhm.
yeah, just to bring that up real quick, all attorneys, like back in the day when I started, some 25 something years ago, I think, yeah, I was always like, oh, just triple the meds. And um, what we have to do as adjusters, of course, it's our fiduciary duty when we are protecting the insured, is to um, pay what we know we owe, pay what the covered claim is, give them the correct settlement amount. And that means that it is tailored, that settlement amount is tailored to that person, that claim. And we actually got a comment on one of our uh, YouTube videos that's, and the person had said, everybody experiences pain differently. And you're absolutely right.
Yeah,
Everybody experiences pain differently. So what can be painful to me may not be painful to you, and vice versa. And we try to take that into consideration. But for example, uh, the example I used last week is if you have a death, an immediate death at an accident scene, there's not going to be a lot of medical bills. Maybe a
right,
transportation to the hospital or whatever, where they, have the morgue and what have you,
right,
versus a very catastrophic accident where they have med flight, and the helicopter comes in. You're going to have huge amount of invoices there. If you were to just triple the meds, the person who died is not going to receive a lot. Their family is not going to receive a lot. Their estate is not going to receive a lot. Versus the person who got med flighted but lived, they are going to receive a lot. And are we saying then that the person who died is worth less than the person who survived?
Right.
That's no, they didn't. They're not. They're not worth less. You got to look at the entire claim,
Yeah.
not just three times med. That's not fair.
Right. Well, with special damages, again, easy to figure out. General damages, not so much.
Not so
So
much.
we're not going to just triple the meds. We're going to look at what the nature of the injury, the severity of the injury, the amount of inconvenience and pain and suffering that that person has gone through and may go through in the future,
Hmm.
and look at what past settlements have looked like to come up with a value.
Hmm.
Now, I
We
don't know
do.
how you can say it, that short of a I don't know. There's no set number or percentage as to when something becomes lowball, like lowball. Like
Yeah, quote
we
unquote.
know what it means, but it doesn't have a good solid number to it.
Mm-mm.
Like if you were to say, Bill, if your offer reaches the 90% below final settlement number, then you've lowballed.
Hmm.
Okay. There's no number like that. And the goal is to be fair, but the goal is also, well, the goal is to be fair. I think that's the bottom line.
Period.
And if it means to get to fair, that the attorney asks for 1 million and you offer 100,000 and you guys settle somewhere in the middle and it gets settled, that's fair.
Right.
I don't know. I don't see the $100,000 offer as a lowball offer on $1 million demand,
Hmm.
when likely that demand was only predicated on the fact that there's $1 million policy limit out there.
Yes. And something that I don't think a lot of consumers understand, and that's again one of the reasons why I hope the book will help with that, is that the amount of settlement is also determined by how much fault is apportioned. So while the case may be worth $1 million, if the claimant is, I don't know, 45% at fault or whatever, and we're allowed to take, a deduction of 45%, in Louisiana, it's pure comparative, uh, then yeah, we our starting offer may be, I don't know, $450,000 or whatever, because you are partially at fault, Mr. Claimant.
Right.
Um, so, and that is something that a lot of consumers don't understand. And if you are talking to, as an adjuster, if you are talking to a claimant, this is going to make them mad. So you need to spend a lot of time explaining that to them. It's going to make them mad. They probably will go ahead and go to an attorney, who does understand this, and they can maybe explain it better. I have no idea. But then you are dealing with an attorney, and that does not necessarily change your amount. A lot of people also believe that going to an attorney or filing lawsuit will increase your offer. It doesn't really. Um, yeah, maybe sometimes it does, because we'll throw in defense cost or whatever, but 9 times out of 10, it does not.
The percentage of liability is also a gray area. There's no set schedule that we look at, and two people can look at the same scenario and come up with a different percentage of damages for negligence for each. But then that ultimately has to be agreed on as well as damages, so that you can wrap the whole thing up with a bow and call it a day and
Yeah.
get the claim settled.
Yeah. And then you
So
send a release. Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. Well, I think we kind of, like you said, beat this horse to death.
yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
All right.
So, next time we're actually going to be talking about lawsuits. And so that will, I guess, continue our kind of theme. Because like
Yeah.
I said, a lot of times when when we're explaining this to an unrepresented claimant, third party claimant, they get very upset and they do believe that having an attorney or filing suit will increase the value of the claim. So I think it would be good to maybe discuss the parts of a lawsuit, what happens when you get a lawsuit, blah, blah, blah. So
And this is going to be a non-attorney viewpoint,
yes, yeah,
to be clear.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. To be clear, just two adjusters making things up as we go along, which is what we do
Right.
the best. Yeah.
Right on. All
Right.
right, Chantel. Well, you
Thanks.
have a great day and we'll
You
see you
too.
soon.
Okay, bye.
Thanks for joining us on the Art of Adjusting podcast, where we talk about life as an insurance adjuster.
If you enjoyed this podcast or this episode, please give us 5 stars and a review. It does help the algorithm pick us up.
Hit that subscribe button real quick and tell all of your adjuster friends to check this out as well. For independent adjusting services, go to www.auten.claims. And for anyone interested in working as an independent liability adjuster, go to the Contact Us tab to join our roster.
In the meantime, you can contact me at theartofadjusting.com for consulting and training purposes.